Matt can't hear me. Mitch is going to the bathroom. It's just me here. I don't know if Matt will keep this part in or not. I'm just talking to the microphone. He keeps looking at me worried that I'm saying something of import. But no, it's just me here. Please hold. We are having technical difficulties.
Welcome to Can't Let It Go, the show about the things that are stuck in our heads. My name is Matt. I use he, him pronouns.
I'm AC. I use they, them pronouns.
I am Mitch. I use he, him pronouns.
Wow.
This is AC and I's friend, Mitch, who we have talked about on the show at least twice that I can think of.
A podcast guest.
I know I got a name check in the video essays episode, and so did my partner, Allison, and that was a delight.
Wait, did we talk about Glassbox in the video essays episode?
No, but I'm so delighted you brought up my AC, my wealth of podcasting experience, which always involves Matt.
That's actually true.
That's
Mitch
delightful.
and I in college ran a terrible podcast that no one should listen to.
Ran is generous.
I mean, I mostly ran it, but we were on a podcast, and I don't think it's available on the internet, and I think that's a good thing.
Good Lord, I hope
don't
it's
want to
not.
know what my 2008 opinions were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it is, I want Elon to buy it and drive it into the fucking ground.
Well, you know what? He's really good at that, I hear. So.
And then what? We did the Inglourious Bastards thing.
Yeah, but that was never for internet consumption. That was for my Comp 2 summer course, where I was tasked with doing some sort of multimedia essay over a piece of media. And it was the summer of 2011, and I was still only thinking about Inglourious Bastards.
I mean, it's a good movie.
I say that like I've ever come out of that phase. Yeah, so we sat around my kitchen table with a couple of friends for about 30 minutes and talked about that movie.
Yeah, listener, if you haven't figured it out yet, Mitch is our token straight friend.
Hey, that's me. Check all the boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pride Month ended, and we brought you a straight guy.
Yeah, we brought a straight guy right on the podcast. We said, time for hetero pride again.
Happy July 4th. That's maybe a little too topical for when this is going to come out. Anyway, today we've brought Mitch on the show because we are going to be talking about the Disney parks and Disney generally, because one thing that I know about Mitch, and I think most people that know Mitch know about Mitch, is that he and his wife Allison are very into the Disney parks, and they put together an incredible trip that AC and my husband went on right at the end of 2019. I consider it kind of the last big thing that I did before
Same.
COVID, and we had a blast. 5 adults chilling in Orlando, drinking a lot. Having a great time.
I'm going to say one of the first nights that we got there, still one of like top 5 drunkest I've ever been in my life. We were absolutely hammered, eating hibachi, and it ruled.
But first, we have a relevant nugget today that I believe AC is going to share with us.
Yeah, I got a good one here. So I'm on Blue Sky now, as was mentioned last episode. And on Blue Sky, someone shared this piece just a few days ago that I immediately clicked open and read. It is titled "My Favorite Conspiracy Theory Confirmed" by Alex Goldman. And in this piece, Alex Goldman details their favorite conspiracy theory, which is that the Donald Trump animatronic in the Hall of Presidents was originally a Hillary Clinton animatronic, and that they had to retrofit it to make it into Donald Trump. And I had never heard this before. I am not, I think you'll hear me mention probably a few times throughout the episode, I'm not a Disney head by any means. I grew up in America. I know a lot about Disney, okay? But I think I blacked out when I read this, and I came to and I remembered that I'd read it again, and it's incredible. I think Alex also went viral on Twitter, and someone DM'd them and like confirmed this conspiracy theory. It's like a one random person sending them a message, and they disclaim that in the piece. But yeah, Mitch, you made a very excited face when I mentioned this. Do you believe this conspiracy theory?
Mitch was fist pumping.
I 100% believe this conspiracy theory, AC. I first heard about this some weeks ago over social media. I have been to and watched the show at the Hall of Presidents since the Donald Trump animatronic has been unveiled, and I recently saw a rather detailed, for TikTok's standards, TikTok about this very theory. And what you're referring to is that the Twitter user Alex Goldman tweeted about this theory originally, and then reportedly, after this original tweet was deleted, an anonymous person claiming to be a Disney Imagineer, and boy, I'm going to use the word Imagineer a lot today, slid per Gizmodo, slid into his DMs confirming said theory. And man, look up the photo if you haven't already. I bet you have.
It's in the liner notes.
Yeah. We'll put the link.
Yeah.
It's cooldudezone.substack.com.
Look up a photo of the Donald Trump animatronic at the Hall of Presidents, and those are some prominent cheekbones, y'all.
Yeah, I have to say that like one of the most damning pieces of evidence is just the facial structure at all, right? Like you look at it and it's like, that's not quite right. And like, I know that like animatronics, they don't always get it exactly right, but like the redacted animatronic in Pirates of the Caribbean ride looks exactly like him, right? Or at least like has the general vibe of like
it would be doing the Imagineers a disservice to not expect them to get greater accuracy to a current sitting president with a very recognizable physical set of features as Donald Trump.
They're very good at it.
And I have to continually point to specifically the cheekbones.
Yeah.
Which are very prominent on Hillary.
Eye shape, generally.
It really seems credible that they spent months developing a Hillary Clinton animatronic. And then, I don't know, around early November 2016, felt the need to change course, but did not, for whatever reason, feel the freedom financially to start from square one, and rather just converted the work they had been doing. I 100% believe this.
So two things. One, the thing that confirms it for me without this anonymous source is the photo of the updated one since they put Biden in it.
Yes.
Which is, it looks like him. It looks like Donald Trump. Like
Correct.
the one that they have now put there looks like Donald Trump. So I also want to know where the hidden like Hillary Trump like animatronic went. Two, this is Alex Goldman, the host of the now defunct Reply All. I just want to call that out.
I did not figure that out. I did not put that together. Holy shit. Okay, Worlds Collide. I loved that podcast, RIP.
Yeah.
I also, I think that this sentence in it is so funny, right? The attraction closed for 6 months after Joe Biden's inauguration, and when it reopened, eagle-eyed Disney fanatics noticed that the Trump animatronic appears to have been fixed to look less like a Donald Trump mask hastily stretched over Hillary Clinton's skull.
I will say, I last saw the Hall of Presidents show in November of 2022, and we didn't sit that close, and I didn't really get that close look at it. I was mostly cowering in horror as all the presidents in order of the presidencies introduced themselves by name, and then as soon as President Trump introduced himself, good 40 to 50% of the crowd whooped and hollered in a way that was not happening for literally any other president. And I just...
Don't they claim to love Lincoln?
Dear listener, I am also a licensed attorney and teacher of American history.
I was actually just about to ask, Mitch, how many times have you seen the Hall of Presidents show?
Relatively few, to be honest, Stacey. I didn't, as it might surprise you, not have that much interest in it as a child. And so I twice as an adult, I'd say.
Okay.
I mostly think of it as a great place for a nap.
Oh my God. And air conditioning.
We did a really funny bit on our trip about that being my favorite, attraction, because I had no interest in going in there at all. So
I mean, what is it? The Carousel of Progress is the other creepy one.
we did that one.
We did that one.
Okay. All right. So this is where we want to diverge, because that holds a very special place in my heart.
Okay. I also learned in this piece by Alex Goldman that there used to be an Ellen DeGeneres ride.
There what?
So I would like to talk right now about all three of the things we've mentioned in the last 20 seconds. I want to talk about the sort of connection of the Hall of Presidents and Carousel of Progress with Walt Disney himself. And I want to talk about Ellen DeGeneres.
Go on.
Which is a sentence. Happy Pride, y'all.
I think we're getting into the main topic. So what I want to say to folks,
get us back on track, Matt,
is that normally we come into these episodes with extensive notes. And I will say, I have no visibility at all into what Mitch is about to talk about. This is his show, so he's gonna take us down topics that he wants to go down, however prepared or not prepared he is, and I am thrilled. So I don't know, Mitch, let's get into it.
Tell me
about how Ellen DeGeneres and Carousel of Progress.
I'd love to tell you I had an outline Google Doc, but I've been having useless, wonderful conversations with Matt and AC for years, and I am counting on that same rhythm finding hold. So briefly, I want to tell you about what that Ellen DeGeneres business was, because I've been on it once.
Wow.
Before it died. And I will tell you what it is now. And then I want to talk about Walt and those attractions. So there used to be an attraction at Epcot. It's not an original attraction. I don't know how long it was around. My guess is, based on the personalities surrounding it, mid to late 90s is when it came around. That's my guess. Epcot opened in the early 80s. It was called Ellen's Energy Adventure. And because the original purpose of the park of Epcot was what the Imagineers called edutainment, education and entertainment. A lot of the attractions were meant to have some sort of educational flair to them. This one was about energy, and specifically the source of fossil fuels, because we're all good little capitalists, and we all need to learn where our wonderful hydrocarbons come from. And so it was a moving ride. You sat in a very, very large car that was not on a track. Oh, here comes my dog into the room. It was not on a track, but it was on a car with wheels that went through a large warehouse with tile floors, and you went in and around animatronic dinosaurs, and you learned about the dinosaur period and how dinosaur fossils are ultimately our source of hydrocarbons. And it was hosted by Ellen DeGeneres and her sidekick, one Bill Nye.
That was not a thing I expected.
Bill.
Pause for effect. Y'all, it was lame.
It sounds like it.
It was not good. You have video projection screens of Ellen creeping in and around the bushes around the Brachiosaurus and making jokes about that era. And it was in 2014. Alice and I were on our honeymoon, in case you had any remaining questions about me. And we were just trying to kill time in Epcot, truly. And so we're like, well, whatever, let's go on this. And yeah, that was that. That building now hosts the greatest roller coaster I've ever ridden in my life, which is
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, which is new, and I rode once in November, and it rules.
Hell yeah.
This Ellen DeGeneres ride reminds me, what was that ride that we went on that was us going through people growing plants and food? AC, you loved it. That
was my favorite one.
I don't remember what that was called, but it sounds like that, but way more boring than that was.
AC, you or me?
You go ahead.
Okay. You're referring to Living with the Land. This is another ride in Epcot, which is another gem of Walt Disney edutainment. It's a slow-moving boat ride, all indoors, where the first part of it is scenes of natural environments and how our human civilization interplays with natural climate and natural resources to sustain our living. And then after you get through all that, you get to ride through active real life greenhouses that are growing all sorts of flowers and trees and fruits and vegetables. And
It's actually really sick.
And farming, sustainably farming fish, which are many and almost all of these herbs and veggies and fruits and fish are served in Walt Disney World restaurants, and it's super tight.
Aside from being sponsored by some of the largest corporate brands in America, it was otherwise my favorite ride. But it really rules. It was really, I think, a very refreshing change of pace for me, a nerd. I guess, like, you know, Mitch is a nerd in a different way.
Right.
But me, a nerd about plants, to be able to be like, wow, a ride just for me, it feels like. I will say the one thing that I do not care for in Living with the Land is the prairie diorama. It's very triggering for me. I guess we also could have mentioned how Living with the Land is very much U.S. government propaganda also, but that's fine.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole lot of like big agriculture propaganda in there, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, it's worth noting, I looked up the Ellen DeGeneres ride as you were chatting about it, right? That ride was sponsored by Exxon, right? And like Living with the Land is sponsored by like Kraft and Chiquita Bananas, right?
Mhm.
So there are, and I think Nestle also, right? Okay, so like on the one hand, Nestle is sponsoring Living with the Land, which is a really cool look at like how sustainable farming can work. And on the other hand, they're stealing water from your rivers and lakes, bottling it and selling it to you for $1.
And
It would otherwise be free.
that continues the Disney Parks' very proud tradition of partnering with corporations for specifically for sponsoring attractions. Walt Disney was, as much as he was an idealist and a futurist and a dreamer, he was a stone cold capitalist. And as much as he,
oh my God,
as much as he hated money and trying to haggle for money and dealing with those struggles of the company, he had no shame about partnering with corporations, mainly to use their money to get some of his stuff built.
So much to the fact that I was going to make a joke and decided to look it up instead because it sounded like a thing the Disney company might do. And I have found out that there used to be a ride that was presented by the Monsanto company.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It wasn't Living with the Land?
No, because that was what I, like, that was vaguely what I was like, thinking I might remember, but no, that was just a joke in my head. But the reality is that there was a ride called Adventure Through Inner Space that was brought to you by Monsanto.
Incredible. Wow. The parody writes itself. Like, and that is, I think, like a thing that's just generally true about Disney is that, like, there isn't much like interesting or new to be said, right? And this is something that we often give a disclaimer about on this podcast. It's not that we have something any like particularly new or interesting to say about this. We're just here to talk shit, right? And, you know, info dump at each other about the things that we can't stop thinking about. So,
and also to enjoy things despite that, right? Like,
yeah,
I think I have eventually we're going to talk about like labor rights because I have to.
Oh boy.
But you know, I still think that like it is okay to like properties owned right by these companies. It's okay to enjoy these things and also be cognizant and like make personal decisions where that's possible, right? Like Matt cannot be responsible, right, for the actions of giant corporations. I can only do what's like within my control and is appropriate for the situation. But you know what? I still fucking like Marvel movies. You know? That said, speaking of Marvel movies, one thing I've personally decided to do is probably pirate, but generally now not watch Secret Invasion. Like, I've watched every Marvel thing since the MCU kind of started, and with the AI art and minor spoiler for the first episode, I was told there's fridging in the first episode. I was like, you know what? I don't need to watch this. This is the decision I'm making. But I don't know. I also enjoy Disney parks. So
yeah. Okay, so Mitch, where did we lose the thread with what you were trying to tell us about Ellen's energy adventure?
We got onto talking about sort of the relationship specifically between Walt Disney and corporate America. And I thought that was a neat little moment to take it back to something we mentioned earlier, which is some of the not original, but some of the earlier attractions at Disneyland in California, where throughout the New York World's Fair in 1964, Walt got several corporations to spend their money paying for him to develop new attractions. And that's what got us the Carousel of Progress, which y'all have deemed as creepy. I deem as delightful.
Big, beautiful tomorrow.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
I'm going to play the song here.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Iger is very litigious. I would be careful. I have a great deal of affection for the Carousel of Progress, but it was sponsored by General Electric. And there's no misunderstanding that when you go and watch it. And every single scene of this delightful slice of 20th century Americana is all filled with what's the latest kitchen gadget technology right now. That's the through line of the entire show. But as a Disney sycophant, you also get to enjoy the history and the animatronics and just the fact that you get to spend 20 minutes indoors sitting down in dark air conditioning.
I'm now remembering the modern day part that's like vaguely like 80s, 90s, because I assume it's been like updated.
Yeah, my eternal curiosity with that final scene you're talking about, and man, this is getting in the weeds, is that I wonder in its initial iteration, was that final scene intended to be like, this is how things are tomorrow, as in like in the very, very near future? Because it's all technology that we see as generally early 1980s.
Right.
Or is this like one day perhaps we'll have appliances that are voice automated and Granny will be playing video games. That's just a curiosity of mine. But that whole thing is just a big commercial for GE, and GE paid for it. And Walt did that just so that he could get them to cover the cost of R&D for his next attraction.
So is Carousel of Progress the one where I was convinced that the voiceover was done by Tom Hanks, but then it was not Tom Hanks?
This checks out.
I feel like that's true.
Every scene involves this middle-aged mustachioed dad talking about his family and the recent technological developments in the home. And it's all very cute and Norman Rockwell-y.
There are many oof moments for me, but I don't disagree.
Yeah, I agree on the cuteness and the oof. Yeah. There's a lot of both.
Correct.
I mean, I think that's just actually like a good assessment of like a lot of our trip was meaning like, wow, this is so cute and fun. And also, woof. Lots of like direct eye contact and raised eyebrows among our group being like, so interesting. Wow, we're walking away.
Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when you talk about those oof moments.
The very first thing that popped into my mind was actually something that we were doing at like the end of the trip. But like, some of the Epcot stuff, right? Like I immediately thought of like Mexico in Epcot is like woof. Right. And like I understand that you're like trying to like generalize about international countries at like a top level, but then when you like layer on like the xenophobia and stereotyping that is rampant in American society with that kind of like alongside that kind of generalization, just like, and I think that is like, I think that's present not just in Epcot, but in anywhere. I mean, I think like Jungle Cruise is another really good example of that, right? Like Jungle Cruise has a lot of like, and I think like Jungle Cruise fans talk about that a lot, right? I don't think that that's like a big secret, right? But for sure, those are like some of the ones that I remember. But I mean, generally, of course, like, anything for me that has the vibe of like American exceptionalism or Western expansion and like yeehaw pioneer country is tough. for a million reasons. And then also like, that's the part that it's just like, why for me, like this trip that we went on was great and so fun and one of the best things I've ever done. And also was like probably the one time that I will be going to a Disney park, because it's not for me at the end of the day, right? I was there to hang out with my friends and see what it was all about, and I've seen it and I'm good, right?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me is that I didn't realize until the first time I went to a Disney park how much Magic Kingdom's like Magic Kingdom is themed around American exceptionalism, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that like I'd never heard the words like in context of Disney, like Main Street USA, until I went there for the first time, right? And it's so funny because again, you're having a great time. There's so many awesome things you get to see. I get really emotional just like knowing I'm in a place that other like millions of other people have been, right? This happened to me when I was, in Rome outside the Colosseum, like in May on our vacation. Like, but Disney and the parks have such like a cultural place in our world, and especially in the US, that being there often is like just a great time to know that I'm there. And then also I'm like, that hallway in Disneyland Paris is dedicated to American inventions. Like that's a choice you made. But yeah, it's a strange feeling to have something that's so fun, like, so right next to something that feels like at least slightly off.
It is so difficult to separate any sort of integral DNA of what makes a Disney park from the particular fascinations of Walt Disney.
Yeah.
I want to say as a disclaimer, my experience in person is entirely with Walt Disney World in Florida. I've not been to any other Disney properties around the world, and I hope to someday, but I haven't yet. Disneyland in California was the first in 1955, but the Disneyland Park in California is very similar to the Magic Kingdom Park in Orlando, with several notable exceptions, but they're comparable. And that the Main Street USA area that Matt you talked about, along with the idea of the Jungle Cruise in Adventureland and the motifs and attractions related to Westward Expansion and Manifest Destiny in Frontierland. Those things in particular are related to Walt Disney's personal fascinations. The idea of Main Street related to his idea of the ideal small town that is sort of loosely based off his claimed hometown of Marceline, Missouri. And he had such great affection for America and whatever that meant to him. American exceptionalism is a great way of putting that. And Westward Expansion in the American West, those were things that he was fixated on. He was a particular lover of trains. And if there's a thing that better symbolizes American expansion for all of its complicating factors,
True.
I can't think of a thing that is more symbolic than the locomotive, right? So it's very tricky because these are things that Disney lovers like myself adore and have so much nostalgia, personal nostalgia, and I think, Matt, what you mentioned about the idea of it being a thing that millions of people are visiting, that's a powerful feeling. But these things can be enjoyed while still acknowledging what feels really, really uncomfortable about a lot of it. And the idea of these American ideas being absolutely forced upon the other cultures around the world as the Disney parks expands, and can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Mitch, beforehand, we were talking a little bit about Epcot, and we both held back because we didn't want to sort of, blow it ahead of time. But I want to hear about I just want to hear about Epcot and, a little bit of what we were talking about, but also just whatever you want to talk about.
Man, I got a lot about Epcot. Epcot is a place that I did not like when I was a kid. And then I learned about alcohol.
Yeah, it really does feel like Epcot is made for adults, not for kids.
So Epcot, for those who are rather unfamiliar, I recently listened to y'all's episode about video essays, and you cited a YouTube video essayist that goes under the username Defunctland, and I watched one of those videos related to Walt's vision of Epcot. Walt Disney died before Epcot ever began construction.
Mm-hmm.
He died when the very first Orlando park was still under construction and quite a ways away from completion. What Walt really wanted to do in Florida was what he was calling Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow.
Oh my God. It's an acronym?
Yes.
AC.
You did not tell me any of this. We were there. I didn't know.
Matt, I'd like to just sit in this for a little while.
Okay, actually, maybe there's a non-zero chance that you told me, and then I drank so many beers that I forgot.
I have a video of you chugging hops.
The worst beer. We were like, a beer from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then we all hated it. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna let a beer go to waste because, you know.
While we were listening to Boyz II Men play next door.
That happened.
Okay, listener, don't be confused. We mean the band Boyz II Men was performing on a stage within our eyesight, not that it was just playing.
As we drank a beer produced and distributed by the band Hanson, named after their signature hit song, Mbop. Yes, it's called Mbops. All three of us are from Oklahoma. Yeah, Epcot is an acronym standing for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Walt had a dream to solve what he called the urban problem. As far as I can tell, there wasn't any direct racial animus in this idea, but he was a person who was concerned with the practicality of urban planning and wanted to create some sort of urban system that maximized the efficiency and happiness of all of its residents and created a more walkable place to live and a more friendly and green place to live while still allowing for the commerce and transportation necessary in a highly capitalized area. In reality, this was entirely unsustainable and left so many unanswered questions about what to do about poverty, about crime, about racial and social inequality, about economic mobility. And as far as I can tell, his only solution was, we'll just expel any undesirables.
Oh, I was going to say, it seems like my observed solution from Walt Disney World is build a tunnel system underneath the park and build a tunnel system underneath every city. And then that's where the poor is going to live.
The tunnels under Epcot were for traffic, but that's not entirely.
Yes, I'm being silly.
he died long before ground could ever be broken on this, and people went bankrupt in the 50s for undermining Walt Disney, but I think we can safely say this was not a good idea. But after his death, as they were developing and expanding Walt Disney World, they did feel, the Imagineers and John Hench specifically, the lead Imagineer, felt the need to pay some sort of homage to his memory and to his desires to turn Epcot into a place that would encourage citizenship and learning. And so Epcot, in its initial stage, is broken into two main areas. One that is all about innovation and technology, and one that is about cultural exchange. It's called the World Showcase, where you have areas surrounding a lake representing different nations around the world, sharing food and drink and culture and a whole lot of credit card points of purchase.
True.
Yeah.
All of which I have swiped at.
Yeah. I have had a lot of alcohol and a lot of food at the World Showcase.
And considered buying a chef's jacket at the Italian Pavilion.
Oh, Jonathan 1,000,000% bought that chef's jacket.
Oh, that's right. He did buy it. It was the hat that he did not buy.
He bought the jacket, and we went to dinner at the hibachi place in the Japan area. And we were there to celebrate his birthday. And for his birthday, he was gifted with a chef's toque at the hibachi restaurant. And then we spent the rest of that drunken evening wandering around the World Showcase with him wearing shorts, a chef's jacket, and a chef's toque, and asking people if they were enjoying the food they were eating, and claiming credit for having prepared said food.
I married this man.
And me following behind him saying, yes, chef, every 10 seconds.
Oh my God.
This way, chef.
And I believe there were more than one parties of guests who wanted to take a picture with this would-be chef.
I can't believe you left out the part where we saw the actual chefs.
And they laughed and like cheered.
Yeah, that was so funny. He pointed at them like he knew them. Oh God, it was so funny.
The lady in the like Italy shop who like gave him a big hug and they nearly fell into the like the case.
She collapsed into him, Matt.
Oh Lord. So anyway, Epcot's for adults, huh?
Epcot's for adults, and they do have several attractions and rides that can be appealing to children and thrill seekers. We've talked about the Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster. We've talked about Living with the Land. People know Epcot iconically as the park that has the big golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
That in there is a very old classic ride about the history of communication. Formerly narrated by Judi Dench. They have recently changed the narrator, and I cannot remember who now is providing said narration. But for the longest, it was Dame Judi Dench. But the reason that visitors like myself and my wife adore Epcot is because of what's called the World Showcase, where you can take a lively stroll around the world, in heavy air quotes,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying margaritas from Mexico and beers from Germany and England and maple popcorn from Canada and egg rolls from China.
The Canada section is beautiful, by the way.
Poutine, baby.
It is gorgeous to look at, and there ain't nothing to do.
Agreed. So something that I find interesting about like you talked about like Walt's vision for it, which was this very strange, maybe Randian experience. But it has become something I think that we enjoy clearly, right? But I also think it's like becoming something that's like a little different than what it was in the past. Again, you talked about the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. I think that that's kind of a part of a major shift. I don't know. I just think there's something there about like what it was meant to me, what it has been, what it is now, and what it's becoming.
That's interesting. You know, I expect that there is still quite a lot of interest and dedication among the Imagineers to maintain the spirit of what Epcot has always been. But there is also a very, very clear philosophy among executives and creatives at Disney. And this transcends different executive administrations, whether it's Michael Eisner or Bob Iger, even all the way back to Walt and Roy Disney, that these parks specifically, nothing is sacred. Nothing is untouchable. Nothing is immune to evolution and development. Disneyland opened in 1955. They had an area in that park called Tomorrowland, where the whole idea was the technology, the transportation, and communication of the future. As you well know, in 4 years, the idea of what the future of technology is can change rapidly. And what seemed like the horizon now seems like the distant, distant past. So 4 years after they opened Disneyland, they had to completely reimagine Tomorrowland and add new attractions because what they had dreamed of as the future was now obsolete and outdated. This was an idea that Walt called plussing.
Oh, I didn't know there was an name
and
for it.
This philosophy has permeated the Disney parks ever since. That he said that as long as imagination exists, Disneyland will never be completed.
It's the opposite of negging.
Oh my God.
That was delayed, but I had to say it. I was waiting. I didn't want to interrupt you right
No, it's
away.
outstanding. This philosophy specifically has never truly gone away. There have been periods of belt tightening. There have been periods of austerity. There have been periods where the parks have been run by merchandise executives and not creative executives. But the idea that these things can always be improved is ever present. And the latest thing we're seeing at Epcot specifically is the emergence of using intellectual property.
Interesting.
Epcot used to be a park free of Disney film and television and merchandising IP. You could not find characters from Disney films or Disney television shows. You would not find an attraction that featured Mickey Mouse. You would find plenty of attractions. You would find things that had celebrities. You have Ellen and Bill Nye, but you would not find things that you recognized outside of Epcot. There was Epcot-specific intellectual property. Disney fanatics will recognize a purple dragon named Figment, who was sort of the unofficial mascot of Epcot. But this has begun to change, and I'm not gonna. I may have the history slightly wrong here, but in the fairly recent past, the massive aquarium at Epcot got a rebranding to be called the Seas with Nemo and Friends.
Yeah.
So it's still a massive, wonderful, educational aquarium with some Finding Nemo flares.
I loved that one.
It's truly wonderful. Because they have not lost any of the wonders. If you're just an aquarium head and you want to go see some jellyfish or some sea turtles or some sharks or some manatees, that's all there. Plus, you can go to a cute show where you can talk to Crush.
Dude,
You should never miss that if you ever go. It's
a great time.
I honestly don't know if it's really popular on TikTok or if my For You page has just really latched on to the fact that I want it. Okay, it's me. Great.
It's the For You page.
I will always sit through it because it is truly for me. It's not the only use of that technology at Disney World. They also use it at Magic Kingdom for a Monsters Incorporated themed comedy show, which I really enjoy. But it seems to me that the performers,
the scare floor, right?
Laugh floor. Yeah.
Laugh floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
The conceit is at the end of Monsters Inc. they figure out that,
that's right.
that laugh provides more power than scream.
That's right.
So they've opened a comedy club.
Yeah.
It's adorable, truly. The performers I find they're typically quicker and funnier with Crush. But yeah, it's great. So the aquarium is the first example I can think of, and I think it was probably among the earliest. But in addition to that, they have just opened a Ratatouille themed ride at the France Pavilion in Epcot, which I believe they premiered in France at the Paris park. The Guardians of the Galaxy themed roller coaster. They are currently under construction on a Moana themed area that, as far as I can tell, is going to be a beautiful garden that features water in a very evocative way. These are simply things that would not have existed in Epcot 15, 20 years ago. There's an incredibly popular Frozen themed ride in the Norway Pavilion that's actually really cool. So yeah, there was
a really long line, I think, when we were there, and we ended up going on it.
Regularly one of the longer lines you're going to have at Disney World. It's like a lot of the longer line rides. I don't think it's worth what you typically have to wait for it, but it's pretty good.
I've been on the Ratatouille ride in Paris. It's fun. The restaurant is below average.
Interesting. But I mean, there are certainly rides at Epcot and IP at Epcot that I enjoy. And I believe that's where you and John met Baymax.
Yeah, it is.
But for my family, the true appeal of Epcot is the World Showcase, the food and drink, the shopping, and the general atmosphere. Whether this is actually realized, I'm not sure, but the general atmosphere of cultural exchange. There is, and this has been largely disrupted because of COVID, and I truly don't know what the state of it is right now. But at least before COVID, what you could get around the World Showcase at Epcot was that in each of the discrete pavilions, that's the name they give to the areas dedicated to each nation, the employees in each of those discrete pavilions would be nationals of the country they're represented. If you went to the Morocco pavilion, all of the employees at the restaurants and shops would be visiting nationals from Morocco on a special visa cultural exchange program. There is a specific statutory device for this kind of cultural exchange that Disney had Congress push through.
Sorry, just gonna interrupt and say, we need very intense immigration reform in this country, and this fucking corporation just said, here's some money, give us immigration reform for the things that we need.
We want the ability to bring in whoever we want. We want to bring in people from France to work at our wine counters in France because we want our American tourists to feel like they're getting an authentic French experience when they are in Kissimmee, Florida. That is 100% what's
Meanwhile,
happened.
the fastest way you can become a U.S. citizen is to marry someone, and that takes 5-6 years at the fastest.
Matthew,
Ask me if I've been through it before.
Is the status podcast still available for streaming and download?
You can still stream and download it. It just, I'm not making it anymore, and I don't really ever want to touch it again. But yes, Status Podcast is a show that I made for 2 years. So
cut this out if you like, but if you would like more and wonderful insight on the status of relationships and immigration in this country, please check out the wonderful Status Podcast. That said, it does create a really, really inviting environment to eat and drink and shop and spend your money. I fancy myself a very, very casual student of language. I don't speak any other languages fluently, but I really enjoy learning about language. And so I get a little thrill after getting my beer handed to me and saying, "Danke, auf Wiedersehen." And that truly is I believe what was in mind when this type of scheme was developed.
Yeah, it was early August 2014 when I went to Epcot for the first time. And who's the choral group in the American Pavilion? What's their name? It's the Voices of Liberty.
That sounds correct.
Mitch and I have done like choral stuff together for a long time, or did in the past.
We're not students of the ocean organism of choral. We have experience in choirs.
Yes, correct. We've been in choirs together, and the Voices of Liberty, despite that really off name personally, are some of the most consistently incredible singers that I think I have ever heard in real life. Like, I went, I think, with our friend Elisa, I believe. If not, it was our friend Elizabeth, who we've also mentioned on the show several times, and heard them. And I just remember, like, we were sitting on the floor and they were doing their thing, and this lady hit this one note. And while she's hitting this note that's absolutely insane, I'm also like, wait, this is a moment when everyone else can kind of relax. And no one was relaxed, and they were nailing it and looking like it was flawless. Like,
wow.
Like, just like it was the easiest thing in the world. And it, like, some of the best singing that I have, like, ever experienced in real life. Anyway, that's just a random thing about Epcot that I love.
The despair that I feel when I walk into that building and I hear them singing, and I can tell that they're at the very end of their set. They are truly, truly tremendous musicians that do wonderful work.
I know a lot of them are in the same, we're going deep on like acapella and choral stuff at the moment, but I know a lot of them outside of work are in the same like local singing group. I don't want to misspeak, but I believe, yeah, I can't find it, so I'm not going to say it, but there's a group I'm thinking of. It's Voces 8, I believe. It looks to be it.
I've heard of them.
The group consists of several performers of the Voices of Liberty. Voctive, that's what it is, not Voces 8.
I would love to know more about the general culture of professional performers, primarily singers and dancers living in Central Florida.
Mm-hmm.
They employ an army of artists. I don't know the details about the conditions of their employment and the quality of their compensation. I imagine it's rather exploitive, but they always are the utmost in professional and the utmost in quality. Mm-hmm. When I was 14, my high school choir went to Walt Disney World to perform as part of some festival. And I don't know anything about the festival itself, and it must have not been anything good because we were not a good high school choir. It must have been if you apply and pay your $800, you're in. But the highlight of that trip for me was that we got to go what they call at Disney World backstage. got to go places where the park and resort guests don't get to go, to one of their rehearsal spaces, and learn choreography and learn music from a full-time Disney cast member who at the beginning of our rehearsal session sang Go the Distance from Hercules. And I felt something in that moment.
You felt God in this
I
Chili's.
felt God in that particular Chili's. He was absolutely spectacular, and I remember sort of pinching myself, thinking at this very moment I'm rehearsing in a place where Disney World performers get to rehearse, and I'm certain I didn't do them justice in that moment. But
I do know that a lot of performers, at least in LA, I don't know much about Orlando, but it seemed to be the case while we were there, like are doing a lot of other gigs on top of Disney, but have a very regular Disney gig.
Yeah, I would imagine that's the case. I would imagine it's probably the exception for someone to have as many roles at the Disney parks to be able to sustain not having any other gigs.
You mentioned labor, and I just wanted to like talk about it. So I've been like alluding to the fact that I went to Disneyland Paris in May, which was an awesome thing. And I think we didn't know, or we wouldn't have gone, was that cast members at Disneyland Paris are currently actively striking for better pay and better benefits. And the day we were there, we happened to choose the other park to go to in the morning and completely missed the demonstration outside the front of their Magic Kingdom. And one of the groups specifically that is demonstrating are the performers. So if you are to find yourself at Disneyland Paris, you would notice that a lot of the parades get shut down, right? Because performers are not there. A lot of the shows get canceled or delayed. That is one country that is dealing with a lot of mistreatment of workers currently. Not that we don't deal with that here in the US, but a lot of people in France are, speaking up and demonstrating for the rights in that way. But I would imagine the company that is basically forcing these workers to stand up for themselves and to demonstrate probably has some shit going on back home too, especially with all the power that they've seemed to swing around in Florida against DeSantis and whatnot. It wouldn't surprise me if some of that went the other way. I also know that a bunch of our friends have worked in the parks, do work in the parks, have worked in other areas of Disney, and at least hope that the people we know are being treated well or have the opportunity to stand up for themselves if they're not.
This is a company notorious for putting NDAs in front of their employees. So there's, I'm certain, a whole lot that we're just not able to get, at least for a given period of time.
Yeah.
Would you like to change topics entirely?
Go for it.
Great. Perfect. No segue, just let's topic jump.
I want to talk about the fucking Star Wars hotel.
Oh,
there's a hotel? Oh, the immersive experience thing. The you check in, you get your lightsaber stuff. Yeah.
I have so many feelings about this, but I want to hear it from you first.
Great. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to bring up was this wonderful thing called the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. That is the official brand name title for what is colloquially referred to as the Star Wars Hotel. It opened somewhere circa 2019, around the same time as Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opened. Galaxy's Edge is the place that you all have been to with me, the themed area inside of the Hollywood
Star Wars Land.
Star Wars Land. Thank you so much, AC. the Wizarding World of Star Wars. The Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is related to, but not part of this conversation. Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser is an immersive hotel experience that Walt Disney World developed basically in conjunction with opening of the Star Wars Land that they had in both Orlando and in Anaheim. And it was a 2-night hotel experience that was intended to be entirely basically live action role-playing immersive, where you are role-playing as though you're taking a luxury cruise on a on an intergalactic cruise ship in the Star Wars universe, where all of the hotel's employees were in character at all times, and you did not have a window to the Central Florida exterior in your room. You had a monitor supported window to outer space next to your outside of your room. And your 2-night stay was populated by activities and missions within your hotel, but also excursions to the planet of Batuu, aka Disney's Hollywood Studios Park and Star Wars Land. They announced they are going to close at the end of September of this year. This is news to AC.
I believe it opened in late 2020, by the way.
Okay.
So the reason I know this is because I was very hype on the idea of Galactic Starcruiser. The concept of like an immersive hotel experience and an IP that I'm hype on sounds actually really cool to me.
Yes.
I know it sounds really nerdy to people.
Yes.
I don't care. That sounds really rad. The fact that it was like $3,000 to $5,000 for 2 days.
Oh, where'd you get that discount?
How much was it?
I'm hearing starting at 4, really. What
Oh.
they're advertising is around 3, but in reality, in the words of my personal hero Kenan Thompson, they sure do get you with them extras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the motto of Disney World.
Oh, yeah.
though.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So first, I want to be clear about what exactly you're getting for your money. They advertised it as a 2-night, 3-day experience. From what I can tell, the actual experience when you're in the resort or in the Starcruiser will in fact, I'll give them the credit of name checking the vessel when you're on board the Halcyon. The performers and the theming and the activities and the food and everything was, as far as I can tell, absolutely top notch. And I have no reason to believe otherwise.
I've watched several videos about it. It looks incredible.
They should get Dolores to go there. You know, Dolores from HR. Have you guys seen these videos? Do you know what I'm talking about? She's she's a cosplayer. She goes to Comic-Con.
I've seen this.
An HR representative with the Empire, and she goes around giving people tickets. It's so funny.
I have seen this.
She has like a whole bit about anybody in a Mandalorian getup being like, I'm writing you up for bringing your child to work again. We've been over this. You can't bring your kid to work.
I've been delighted by this. Yes, thank you for reminding me of that.
Anyway, they should bring her to the Star Wars hotel to make it more popular again.
As far as I can tell, the experience itself is absolutely spectacular. That Disney knocked it out of the park when it comes to the quality of the immersive experience. However, it was marketed as 3 days, 2 nights. Here's day 1. Check-in starting at 1 p.m. Activities begin at 4 p.m. Day 2, half your days at the park. Day 3, checkout is at 11 a.m.
Interesting.
You spending $6,000 on that?
Mm-mm.
No. Let me tell you what else you could get for $6,000. An entire week with park passes every single day at a Disney moderate or deluxe hotel.
Oh, I was going to say a multi-city trip to Europe, but that's just because that's what I'm pricing out right now.
That too, and there's of course so many wonderful and necessary things you can buy for $6,000.
Sure.
The conversations that my family has had is we only get to go to Disney World every couple of years, 2 to 3 years ish. That is less frequently than we want to go. But when we can manage to have the time off and money saved up to go, what are we going to do? Spend 5 nights at a good hotel and go to all the parks? Or spend 2 nights at one hotel and spend half a day at one park?
Yeah.
So my theory is that Disney finally found the thing that customers didn't want to pay for.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I think there's also something to be said for like if it opened in 2020, like people's bottom lines have just changed in the last several years. Like, I think that sounds like something I would love to pay for. I just don't have $5,000 to pay for that, right? Like, I think like the economics of it comes down to it, because I think what it sounds like is like the hardcore fans who were able to afford it did get to do that, right? And did have these great experiences, right? But the bottom line is that for the majority of this country, the last 3 years have radically shifted our paychecks and how we choose to spend our money, and like where we see value in the things that we choose to do, the ways that we spend our time, and what we care about in terms of experience. And like, I think that there's an overall shift to like quantity of quality time, right? If that makes sense. It's like it's not about just the quantity either, right? Like in what you're saying, Mitch, of like the quantity of like the difference of 5 or 6 days at the parks. It is also about like, that is the choices between a 2-day family vacation and a 6-day family vacation. And you would rather spend more time with your family getting to do things that make you feel like you are having fun, connected family time, right? And so I think that that's like also an unignorable part of like why it sounds like to me like that just doesn't, the average American doesn't have that kind of cash right now.
I strongly agree. And I think that I don't know how this would have succeeded had the opening not relatively coincided with the onset of the pandemic. The Starcruiser is the best example of this, but I think there's a larger thing going on here, which is that right before COVID, Disney had a transition of who their CEO was, and Bob Chapek, who had been the head of Disney Parks, took over for Bob Iger because the CEO has to be named Bob. Listener, my dad is a CEO named Bob. And
you too could one day be a CEO named Bob. Mitch, you should dream
if
big.
Anybody would hire me. But the Bob Chapek time at the head of the Disney Corporation was open to much criticism, and especially with Disney Parks, while trying to recover from COVID, financially from COVID, I should say, was marked by nickel and diming, a lot of which I think is worthy criticism. And the company has since been handed back over to Bob Iger, who seems to be reveling in his power while scrambling again to find a successor. And so a lot of things went poorly with the parks since 2020, as can entirely be expected. If you want more information on that, please go watch the FastPass video essay that Matt cited in the video essays episode. I think that the entire FastPass thing is emblematic of the financial reaching about that Disney has done recently.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that in a second, because I know that you've experienced a new system, but I just have 2 thoughts on Star Wars. One is to finish up. I've said many times, I've watched several videos of the Starcruiser, totally with you on price. The thing that it sounds like they did well, and that it doesn't surprise me that they did well, was the story, was the immersive nature of it. That is what I love so much about Galaxy's Edge, right? Getting to walk into a planet in the Star Wars universe, and like Rey jumped in one of our pictures. You know what I mean? Like, like it's cheesy.
There's an entire story.
Right. There's a whole story. There's a 2-day literal rotating story that starts in the morning one day and ends in a big show at like 6:30 p.m. the next night. Right. And there's like a lead character of the park that you can meet and run into, and like the things, not necessarily on the rides, but like the experience around it kind of shift and change throughout that 48 hours. There's whole like shows that happen, you know, every other day. I walked up on one of, you know, some like Empire folks like coming out of a spaceship, right? And Kylo Ren being there, and just seeing some incredible acting to imply force powers. It is, Mitch is holding up a Coca-Cola bottle from Galaxy's Edge, and it is such an incredible time. It doesn't surprise me that that is what they got right about that experience. Earlier we were talking about a little bit, and this is the second thing I want to mention, was that a lot of the parks generally have a sense of something incredible, something that is really, really gripping and enjoyable, and also something that feels a little bit off, So whether it's Frontierland, and the stuff that we've talked about, westward expansion, et cetera, or in this case, for me, and for I think I've seen a lot of people recently, as like people have started to realize like, oh, Disney's an option, right? I can go back. Is the shop in Galaxy's Edge that sells space Nazi memorabilia, basically.
Yeah.
And I have seen that get brought up by people that I don't think of as like, people that think too deeply about it. I think we've talked about Andor. We talked about this shop on the Andor episode, but like at least my online friends, right, who really enjoyed Andor, who I was talking about Andor about, or talking about Andor with when it came out, the ones that, have since been to the parks and talked about it have like pointed out that shop as being like, this feels like the thing that is wrong about this place.
Yeah.
Like buying costumes with not quite swastikas, I don't know, feels weird. And it feels like the kind of thing that, I don't know, they don't always get it wrong, but is like a common story in Disney parks where like there's something really incredible to enjoy and then like this little taste of something off.
Yeah, I think my favorite parts of the parks when we were there was like the parts that felt like fully somewhere else, right? The parts that I struggled with the most were Frontierland, or like things that like felt like too close to a very sanitized version of the reality that I was familiar with. And the most fun parts were the parts that transported me to somewhere else entirely, right? Like absolutely, it was so fun in the area in Hollywood Studios where it's like the Muppet Studios, right? And like I guess that's close to reality, but I also know that that's like not actually what like a Hollywood lot feels like in the same way that they portray it, and feels like you're on a movie set in a way that feels fantastical, right? Like those are my favorites. And then also, right, obviously I talked quite a bit in the Andor episode about how much that aspect of it draws me out of it. And so it's very interesting. So I think I don't want to like elaborate on that, because certainly you can go back and listen to our Andor episode to hear all of my feelings and Matt's feelings. I do also, Mitch, want to hear more about this new FastPass, whatever it is they're calling it now. And then I don't think we can make it out of this episode. We have to talk about Splash Mountain.
So, as a way of offering an option for guests who are planning ahead to not skip, but experience shorter wait times for popular attractions, Disney has gone through all kinds of iterations of what we will call a fast pass system. Once again, for more information, see Defunct Land. I've seen a few different iterations of this system personally. The one that is in existence now is wildly confusing and unwieldy. And to my ultimate disappointment, more costly financially. For years, when I tried to proselytize for Disney World being the ultimate family vacation destination, I often shilled for the idea that all of these extra features were not free, but were built into the cost that you pay on the front end and have time to save up for and can plan for, that can improve your vacation experience without thinking of added cost after you get to your vacation, including Disney's array of complimentary transportation options, including the ability to pay for the bulk of your food beforehand, and the ability to, if you're staying at a Disney World resort, which are expensive but wonderful, the option to make what they call fast pass selections ahead of time, where you can choose some weeks in advance a small selection of rides that you want to wait in shorter lines for, where you pick a return time throughout the day, an hour-long window, where if you show up to that attraction during that window, your line is significantly shorter. We're talking the difference between an hour and 10 minutes. That used to be a complimentary feature for all Disney park guests, and you had earlier access to it if you were staying at a resort. Earlier, AC and I were talking about how the pandemic has resulted in some unpopular changes, specifically in the terms of requiring more guest spending. And this is a really good example of that. Sometime last calendar year, sometime in 2022, they introduced a new system where the very word FastPass was extinct. And what used to be called the FastPass line, aka the shorter line, was now called the Lightning Lane. Cool, it's a rebrand. We love a rebrand. Disney loves a rebrand. But the trick was what had to be done to gain access to the Lightning Lane. For most individuals, that meant paying on a daily basis for a product called Genie Plus. Disney really gets in the weeds of its own branding here. Let me tell you, as someone who really has a pretty good grasp on these things, it had me for a little while.
As someone who's currently wearing a Mickey Mouse ears hat with a little tail coming out between the ears.
Listener,
Yeah.
I'm wearing Mickey ears in the moment. They were purchased on Thanksgiving Day at Disney's Animal Kingdom 2022. Genie Plus was a daily purchased product that you could buy starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on the day you intended to use it, that gave you the ability to access reservations for lightning lanes throughout the day.
What does that mean?
God.
Access reservations.
So you log on at 7 in the morning.
So anytime before 7 a.m., anytime between midnight and 7 a.m., you could get on your My Disney Experience app, their all-inclusive app, which, by the way, has gotten pretty fucking good as far as all the things it offers and how functional it is.
Mm-hmm.
You could log onto your app and you could purchase for you and, if you wish, your entire vacationing party on an individual basis, on an a la carte per person purchase basis, the service of Genie Plus for that upcoming park day.
For how many US dollars?
Oh, that varied.
Based on like traffic and whatnot?
Based on how popular your park was, based on how many attractions that park had, based on how many people they expected the park were expected to be at the park that particular day. The advertising and blogs said, between $12 to $15 per day. In my experience, it was about $25 to $30 per person. But if you purchased Genie Plus, starting at 7 a.m., you could, on your app, look at the different attractions available, whatever park you plan to visit that day, and you could begin to make Lightning Lane reservations for whichever members of your party you preferred. But you could only make one Lightning Lane reservation at a time. This Lightning Lane reservation gave you the ability to arrive at that attraction within a window of 1 hour somewhere throughout your day. Could be any point throughout the day. And during that window, you would have access to the Lightning Lane line, just as if you had a FastPass in the previous system. But you could only make an additional Lightning Lane reservation if and when you redeemed your existing Lightning Lane reservation, or by the time that 2 hours had passed since you made the first reservation.
Oh my God.
Do your heads hurt yet?
Is it gonna get more complicated?
The thing I thought you were going to say was I couldn't make the second one until like the window had gone up. But the fact that it's until it's 2 hours since you booked, that is impossible to remember.
I didn't get a grasp on the 2 hour thing until most of the way through our most recent Disney trip, where I felt like I had failed my entire party, which was a substantial party.
So I have to stay up after midnight on every day of this vacation?
The ability to purchase your Genie Plus for the following day begins at midnight. Basically, as soon as that calendar date begins, you can purchase the service. But you've got that 7 hours between the ability to purchase and 7 a.m.
Okay.
At 7 a.m., at that point, you may begin reserving your selections, but only one at a time.
Okay, so I just have to wake up. I have to wake up before 7.
Correct.
To purchase my Genie Plus for the day. and then manage all of the rides.
And if you're not a morning person, I'm so sorry. You're not riding anything in less than 30 minutes.
Yeah, I am not a morning person. This sounds like it blows.
I feel like you guys worked and were so nice to me our whole trip. I also am not a morning person, and you guys were so nice to help me wake up early, and I would be terrible at this.
And I'm so grateful that this was not an obstacle that we had during our last trip. Because honestly, for my wife and I, who are really, really dedicated Disney park goers, the 7 a.m. thing is not an inconvenience. I am usually awake at or before 6 a.m. on any day I intend to go to the park, because we are usually there at or near the time the park is opening, and I like to have time to have coffee and stretch and not be rushed in the morning. But that is me. That is our style, and there's a whole fucking lot of people going on vacation at Walt Disney World. So
no, it sounds like a full-time job at this point.
May I complicate it?
No. Please don't.
I knew you were going to say this, and I am already upset. But please.
So the attractions that are available to be reserved in the Lightning Lane for when you buy the Genie Plus does not include every attraction at that park. In addition to...
Why?
Well, because money.
No.
At all 4 of the theme parks, and I shouldn't assume, possibly at both of the water parks. I've never been to either of the water parks there at Disney World, so I don't really know how they operate. So let's keep it at the theme parks. At all 4 of the theme parks, the 1 or 2 most in-demand attractions are not available on the Genie Plus service.
So there's just
you pay
no.
So let's take this out of hypothetical and let's use a real life example. The most popular attraction at Disney's Animal Kingdom is an Avatar ride called Flight of Passage. I think we wrote it.
It rules.
It truly rules. It's a wonderful ride. It's a flight simulator that is really, really great. It is consistently the longest line at Walt Disney World.
Fascinating.
If you find a line there under 2 hours, good for you.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we had
good for James Cameron.
And when we went, we had FastPass for under the old system. So our wait was 20 minutes. That ride would not be available under the Genie Plus system. You would not have any ability to get a Lightning Lane reservation if you bought Genie Plus. It is included in the category of what we call individual Lightning Lane selections, aka these are individual. You may purchase a Lightning Lane reservation for them a la carte if you choose.
Also priced by demand?
Yes, but it is not at the same price point as the Genie Plus. Here we're talking sort of $8 to $15. You may ride it free of charge, but if you want to not waste half your day riding it, shell out $15.
Yikes!
And get and that's not an exchange for getting in the line immediately. That's an exchange for being given a time at which you can show up to the ride and wait in a shorter line.
And to be clear, the fast pass that I have enjoyed the most is the one where you walk up to a machine nearby the ride itself, get a ticket, and come back on the time it tells you, and that is free. And that's at Disneyland. That's in California.
And that is an erstwhile system at Walt Disney World as well. When I was first introduced to FastPass, when I was in between the ages of like 10 to 16 years old, that's what they did. I first experienced a digital FastPass system when I was in my mid-20s, when you can make your FastPass selections digitally weeks before your trip, and you had your times already scheduled when you could go to those attractions at a given time.
And that's what we did.
Yeah.
I like that fine, but that places a high premium on existing knowledge and an ability to plan your trip in detail ahead of time.
Yeah, this has now really slid into place context for a video that I saw that I didn't really understand, where someone, as like a punishment for losing a fantasy football tournament, had to let Genie Plus decide their rides for the day. And I didn't understand why it was a punishment, and now suddenly I do.
Yeah, they have an AI powered like itinerary
Yeah.
suggestion machine that is just awful. It's just bad. That's probably what they're
Yeah.
doing
Well, because
there.
they have to pretend that everything is equally good, right?
Yeah, and they have to pretend that they can just throw up a suggested itinerary and it will make perfect sense given your mobility around the park and parade schedules and food schedules and nap schedules for your children. And yeah, no,
Doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't make any
Terrible.
sense. Out of necessity, my wife and I have found a way to make it work. I'll say, as being basically the heads of a family trip of 11 individuals last November, most of which were Disney casuals to novices. It was a nightmare.
Mhm.
Terrible. All right. Speaking of terrible things, terrible but wonderful. I don't know.
Let's talk Splash Mountain.
Splash Mountain, baby. I don't even know where to start. Maybe the good place to start is like one of the best pictures of all of us on a ride together is from Splash Mountain, from
Do you
this
mean
trip,
the only good ride photo we got?
where we're all in the same picture. Yeah.
This is tangential and can absolutely be cut out, but that trip, I had an unlucky habit of my face being covered in every single ride photo.
It was like a running joke.
It was
by the
like
end of the
it was
trip.
like in How I Met Your Mother, how Marshall's eyes are always closed.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. And Splash Mountain was one of the few good ones we got.
Yeah, it's a great photo of all of us.
You also got soaked, didn't you?
Oh yeah, there's a really great photo. We'll include it in our notes. The Splash Mountain warning is like you may get wet. And I came off of the ride. I was in a spot on the car where, just like because of how the weight was distributed in the car or wherever it was that I was seated, I got more water in the face than anyone else. I literally was drenched. There was not a single wet hair on my head.
I was behind you and I was barely wet. Like directly behind
I'd like
you.
to tell you it's unpredictable. But one of my toxic traits is always making sure I'm in the dry spot on that boat.
Yeah, no, I was truly set up for this in a delightful way. And I think I had an inkling that that's what was happening. And it was still fun.
His head nods
I was a
emphatically.
good... Yes, I was a good sport about it, I will say. There's a very funny picture of me thumbs upping with my glasses covered in water. You may get wet. Yeah, so I think okay, as someone who going to this Disney World trip, I'll get us started on this Splash Mountain conversation. As someone who going into this trip, didn't know that this existed in this way, right? I don't think that I really had a lot of context for Splash Mountain in terms of I knew that it existed. I think I didn't realize the extent of it, and I didn't realize how much it would make me open my eyes wide in general surprise that this was still a ride in 2019 that they had not decided to retrofit yet. And I think we were there at the point that they had announced that they were going to be retrofitting it, but had they announced what the new theme would be?
No.
Probably not.
Okay.
I believed at the time it was my last time riding Splash Mountain as it was.
I remember you saying that.
It closed down as in the form that we knew it January of this year.
Okay. Yeah. I think the other thing that we were really struck by, obviously there are the themes of coded racism that are very coded is maybe a strong word there. The ride is really it's really gay.
Yeah. I was about to say, not only is it racist, it's also homoerotic.
Very.
I so badly want you to talk about this, but I want to interject quickly beforehand and tell you that I didn't catch any of this until I wrote it with y'all. Proceed.
Well, we're so sorry for ruining your favorite ride, maybe. I know that it was a cherished one for you. There's many moments where people have limbs tied and butts exposed, and
I'm specifically thinking it's a bear and a rabbit, right?
So Brer Rabbit is your hero of the story, and this is heavy air quotes
Oof.
on. He's your protagonist.
He's the protagonist. That's right.
My AP Lit teacher would be proud. He's your protagonist, and he just wants to have a good time and go to his quote laughing place. And he is being hunted by the villain Brer Fox and his dim-witted sidekick Brer Bear. There's your basic structure.
Right.
Yeah. So Brer Fox and Bear are always trying to catch Brer Rabbit.
Right. And there is a scene where Brer Bear is tied up in like vines with his ass showing. Right.
Correct.
And it is like lightly coded gay bondage porn.
Once again, coded feels like too strong.
There's one scene where Brer Bear is like caught in the briar patch and his butt is like hanging out, and like Brer Fox is like trying to push his butt like inward. But there's another scene earlier in the ride where Brer Bear has been caught in like a rope snare, where his arms and legs are like caught up, and he's like trussed up like a Thanksgiving turkey. And his butt is just like hanging, like swaying freely towards the ground as though on some sort of swing kind of rig.
Yep.
Mitch, cover your ears. He's trussed up like a twink on Pride weekend.
It's not just like the lightly coded racism. It's also like a ride based on Song of the South, and like Zippity Doodah is from that movie, which I did not understand until I went to Disney for the first time. Did not know that
Zippity Doodah was for a very long time, basically throughout my childhood, sort of an unofficial theme song of Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've known that song my whole life before I ever knew anything about the film.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like there was a short of Zippity Doodah from something that I saw as a kid that was like a Disney short of some kind, and not as short in the sense that Pixar uses it, but either a clip on a video, or like something like an Adventures of Winnie the Pooh tape that had an intro or something.
The scene from Song of the South in which that song appears is as far as all the things in that film that are gross. That particular scene can exist separately if you knew nothing else.
Yeah.
You knew nothing else about that project and that film. It's a rural black gentleman singing to a bluebird. So that could exist as a short by itself.
Yeah, and that's what I have seen. That is what I remember.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. I mean, the entire thing about Splash Mountain is so emblematic of like, I think that it's so interesting that one of the themes that you've drawn out, Mitch, is that like the Disney machine is always open for plussing or for change, right? But I will say that there is something like interesting and insidious about a corporation that really only responds to it feels like they're, as much as they are willing to make changes and adjustments, they are not willing to make changes and adjustments that are truly like progressive before the culture is moving in that direction. I mean, think of the Hillary Clinton Donald Trump mask situation, right? The assumption was that Hillary Clinton would be the winner, right? And they moved in that direction, and they moved wrong, and it presumably cost them a lot of money, right? So I understand why the machinations of corporate America and capitalism as a whole like aren't interested in doing the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. But it's very, very interesting to me because I think it just always strikes me because like there is a large base of fans and of people who would be interested in that being different, right? Like there is money to be made that they leave on the table on a regular basis by exploiting their workers and by behaving in ways that are not socially responsible. Not that corporate social responsibility will, free us all from capitalism, but like it's not nothing, right? In the grand scheme of things. But I can't stop thinking about the contrast between the theme of like Disney is always willing to change and adjust and be a little bit different, and the persistence of a ride like Splash Mountain.
And I think specifically the things they choose to do first, right? Specifically, we talked a lot about Epcot and, the ways that Epcot is changing and is moving towards IP, right? And that seems to be out of some perceived necessity, that is about the ways that Disney drives culture and the way, and that being sort of the machine with which they make money versus, things like Splash Mountain, where like it's been years of people complaining about this, this is the thing that happens sort of like after those Epcot plans are announced.
Yeah. I don't know.
The thing that happened first before Disney, and years before Disney bothered to enact plans to remove this IP from the park, was that Disney released another piece of valuable intellectual property that celebrated the culture and music of the American South. That was until Princess and the Frog was released in 2009. Song of the South was really the only thing they had, other than the Rescuers Down Under, that was
oh no
that was any sort of recognition or celebration of the American South, and the Princess and the Frog is a much more respectful and holistic take on at least one region of the American South. And so, while I appreciate that Disney's made this change, they didn't do it until they had IP on the table. It was incredibly popular. They had literally another Disney princess to put in its place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you go to Disney Plus and you watch On the Imagineering Story, which I think is a terrific documentary series,
it's incredible.
While it is absolutely Disney propaganda, it's really, really well done. I brushed up on it for research for this chat we're having. When they talk about Splash Mountain, they narration by Angela Bassett only addresses Song of the South by saying a problematic film called Song of the South.
Oof.
And when you queue up a movie like Aladdin, there will be a disclaimer screen before the film starts that says that this film contains portrayals of cultures that is not flattering and is not the celebration of their diversity. I don't know exactly what the language is, but they include these disclaimers, which are all proper, and I'm grateful that they exist, but they only exist after the profit center is created.
Yeah. It feels like less than the bare minimum after the fact, in like a way that is just not the way that I wish the world was. I guess.
And this is our champion in the state of Florida, by the way.
Yeah.
No, don't say that. Please. Ouch, my feelings.
Mitch, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you had talked about in regards to Disney World, or wanted to, I don't know, say in response to our conversation?
I want to say that I have a lot of criticisms for Walt Disney World and the Disney Corporation. I also unabashedly and unashamedly adore Walt Disney World. And I'm going there. The plan right now is twice within the next year and a half. So I want to be transparent about that I fully intend to spend my money and time there. And it is the source of a great deal of joy for my family.
Yeah.
I could spend just as much time talking about the stuff that I adore without caveat as the stuff that I think is worthy of really, really nuanced discussion.
I was going to say, I think it's worth saying that, like, I also, without caveat, had a delightful time, like, on our trip. And I know that so much of that is, like, because of, like, the friendship that we share and, like, the magic that was made, if you will, right? But, like, that we got to... There are parts of me that really saw and acknowledged how special and magical it would have been for me, like if my family had been able to afford traveling to Disney World as a small kid. And I certainly got to experience some of that like magic and wonder and nostalgia as an adult, even when, the things that are hardest for me were less, I was able to put them out of my mind. And so I think that, like, I think about, like, getting to meet, like, the Stitch character and, like, getting to meet Sorcerer Mickey, right? Like these characters that played pivotal parts of my childhood, and that like that warm fuzzy place in my heart I still have for them, right? Was very like dear to me, and I'm glad that I got to do it.
Mitch, what's one of the things that you love at Disney World without caveats?
Is it the Winnie the Pooh ride?
No, it's not. It is the Epcot Food and Wine Festival.
Hell
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
I
That's some good shit
I
right there.
adore Epcot, and we're getting to the point where they've got a festival going on more days than they don't. But roughly every fall, they have a whole lot of food and alcohol from around the world. And the more you buy, the more checks you get to make in your passport booklet. And for a foodie, borderline alcoholic, and completist, it is wonderful.
It is a great time. Also, the shopping in the Japanese area.
Mm-hmm.
Is
the Japan
one of
shops
my
are
favorite
unmatched.
parts.
Unmatched.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts just of the
Yeah.
park.
As a much more sincere answer, I and my wife and I absolutely adore actually and hypothetically planning a Disney trip.
Mm.
The Disney has made the process of preparing for your trip incredibly fun. Of picking your resort, if you can manage to stay at one of the resorts, picking where you're going to eat, picking which parks you're going to go to, talking about how you're going to spend your days. My wife and I will throw out hypothetical prompts of how we would address a certain scenario in planning our Disney trip, and we will do road trips, just exchanging those kind of conversations. When the five of us were planning our trip, I just for the hell of it put together a PDF walking y'all through step by step how to get your package booked on the Disney website, just because I wanted to.
It was great.
Yeah.
You're describing the fun of like deck building in playing Magic, right? Like this is the equivalent.
Yeah, it's also the equivalent of building and running a character in a TTRPG game, which is what I do. So yeah.
Well, then this is my D&D.
Yeah.
One of the D stands for
Okay.
Disney.
Your diners, drive-ins, and dives.
And we are rolling out.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I truly love that exercise, and we'll do it even when we don't have a Disney trip upcoming.
Well, this has been Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives with Matt, AC, and Mitch.
I think that brand is also taken. I don't know if they're as
Damn.
litigious.
I can't imagine he's gotten where he's gotten without having at least a little bit of litigation in his body.
Hey, that I think it's going to be the episode because I need to go
That's
eat dinner.
Yeah.
Hey, Mitch, do you want to be found online or would you like to be left alone?
I'd be happy to be found online to the extent that Twitter still exists when this thing is released. You can find me at Mitch McGrew, McGrew. I post awful things there. You can find me at the same handle on Instagram.
Sweet. AC, where can people find you on the internet this time?
This time you can find me still on Twitter somehow. Twitter.com/ACFachi. You can also find me on Blue Sky. acfachi.bluesky.app or .bsky.app. I'll get that URL right one of these days.
If you search AC Fachi and you're on Blue Sky, you'll find them right there.
I'm also on Blue Sky.
Oh yeah, welcome to Blue Sky,
welcome
Mitch.
Blue
Thank you. Everything's awful.
You can find me at matthorton.live. It has all the things there. I don't think that's my Blue Sky. Should probably put that on there. Share the show with your friends. There's a very simple URL. It's can'tletitgo.gay. The way that podcasts grow is by sharing with people. You might hear other people ask you to review things. That's great. We'd love a review, but the way that, the show gets out there is by you telling your friends and your family. I want to thank Scout Wilkinson for our art. You can pay her at ko-fi.com/humblegoat whenever she has commissions open to make some art for you. And I want to thank my friend Ethan at Pragmatism on Twitter. I do not have an updated link for him in case he has moved somewhere else for making our music.
And a big thanks to Mitch for being our first guest and being a part of this wonderful chaos that we're building here at Can't Let It Go. .gay.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I love the two of you so dearly, and I'm excited to talk to you on recording or not, especially about things that an average person has no business knowing so much about. But if that is not the spirit of Can't Let It Go, I don't know what is.
I think that is appropriate, and I will probably use it again. I think that's it, and we will talk to y'all next time.
Talk to you next time. There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.